Members of the HEC administration, members of TUM School of Management, and of course, good morning and welcome to our distinguished guest, Jean-Jacques Tardin. Before I begin, I just want to say that I'm sincerely honored to hold my very first opening speech as the next president of HEC Débat. I deeply thank the entire HEC Débat team and especially my predecessor Tanguy for trusting me and supporting me in this new adventure. I will also like to thank our partners, Mazars and Lebrun de Neuville. We are very fortunate to have the opportunity to continue working with you this year. We are very pleased, most importantly, to be able to hold this European Union Week with our partners from TUM, and especially this conference with you, Mr. Dordain. Thank you a lot for being here with us today and to share your precious experience and your valuable expertise as the former president of the European Space Agency. This conference will surely be very interesting and instructive for everyone. It is an honor for the entire team of HEC Débat, TUM, and for our students to have the opportunity to talk and debate with you today. To everyone, have a good conference and see you tonight at 6 p.m. for another thrilling conference with Pierre Gattaz, former president of MEDEF and chairman of RAGIO. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for your appointment. I am very glad to be with you today, even though I don't see a lot of people. But I know that you are listening to me. So, just
Yes, thank you very much, and we are going to ask you to introduce yourself in a few minutes, please.
Okay. No, I shall try to be short, even though I am old. I shall be short in my introduction because I think that the exchange are more important than the introduction. Just to say that I flew into space on the 4th of October 1957. No one of you were born at that time. But on the 4th of October 1957, it was the launch of Sputnik. And I was just entering the secondary school. But for me, Sputnik was much more important than my arrival in the secondary school. And I must say that I have followed the decade separating Sputnik from Armstrong on the moon at school. And I can tell you that I was much more interested by what happened in space than by the lectures. But okay, I can say that because I am sure that all my professors are not anymore on planet Earth. So I got my engineering degree in July 1969 when Armstrong stepped on the moon. And since then, I am in space. I have never come back, and I have no intention to come back. I have had many successive functions, from a rocket engineer to an astronaut select. I was among the 5 first French ever selected to become an astronaut. I could not do it, meaning that the backup was to become Director General of ESA. And I have been Director General of the European Space Agency from 2003 and 2015. And now I am continuing in space, being involved in around 15 startups in Europe, developing launchers, satellites, or services based on space data. So many functions, but one passion only, space. That it's very clear. I have also only one citizenship, but many nationalities, because I have worked at ESA with 22, even 23 nationalities, because Canada was part of the, was an associate member of ESA, but also working with the United States, China, Russia, India, Japan, and so on. So many nationalities at the same time. I have one belief only, which is that the future, wherever it is, the future is based on bridges rather than walls. And unfortunately, there are so many people building walls much more than the ones who are building bridges. But we need these bridges, and we may come back to that during our exchange. And just to finish, I have one pride: to have transferred to many of my students the passion of space. I have a lot of students everywhere in the world working in space, and I must say that this is certainly my pride, because you are Director General for a limited period of time. You are a professor forever. This is for sure. So this is, I shall stop there, and now I think that we can start with the exchanges.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Dodin. And to begin with the first quite introductive question, simply, where does Europe stand in terms of spatial? So what are the currently mission, projects, and cooperation objectives?
Yes, Europe in space. First of all, and maybe I can start by that Europe, the current European Union and space, they have started the same year, 1957, because 1957 in March, there was the Treaty of Rome creating the Community of Europe. And 4th of October 1957, it was the first satellite launched by USSR. So born the same year and coming from the same origin, which is a war, the Second World War, because Europe was never again. And the launch of a satellite was coming from the rockets which have been developed during the Second World War. So in spite of that, Europe has started late in space. 7 years after Sputnik. I was mentioning Sputnik in 1957. The first European organization for space have been created in 1964, which was 7 years later. And that initial delay, the first satellite which was launched by Europe was in 1968. So it was the very first small satellite launched by Europe, and it was the same year, 1968, when for the first time 3 US astronauts made a circle around the moon, just to give the gap at that time between Europe and the USA and also USSR. The second aspect, and that I would like to say, that Europe is complex. I know a lot of different Europes. Let's say member states are part of Europe. ESA is part of Europe, but it's an intergovernmental organization. The European Union institutions are Europe. So there is a lot of Europe, and does not make Europe simple. And third point, Europe spends much less money than other space powers in the world. Let's say the ratio between the public spending in Europe and the public spending in the United States is a ratio of 6 to 7, which is huge. But in spite of that, being late, being complex, spending much less money, Europe has succeeded to become a leader in many space activities. First, in science, we have been the first one to land on Titan, which is the farthest place where someone has landed. We landed on Titan, and we were the first with the mission Huygens. We have disclosed the first light after the Big Bang with the mission Planck. And we have landed with Rosetta on the comet Chury. So that is, nobody has done that before Europe. And we are certainly in Europe the ones who are taking care the most about planet Earth. The program of Earth observation of Europe with the Earth Explorers program of ESA, we are trying to much better understand planet Earth. And by understanding planet Earth is to predict the future of planet Earth. So that it's in terms of science. In terms of services, in telecommunications, the biggest telecom operators, satellite telecom operators are European. This is SES in Luxembourg, Eutelsat in Paris, Inmarsat in London. So the biggest telecom operators are European. In terms of meteorology, EUMETSAT is by far the first service provider of meteorology data. And with the European Union programs, Copernicus and Galileo, we are delivering a lot of services, and especially with Copernicus, because the access to data is free and open, and Google is the best user of the Copernicus data. And so we are at the front row in many aspects, and especially I would like to insist on the priority given by Europe on environment, using space for understanding planet Earth and its environment. I would like to add that Europe has innovated in many domains, because we are always speaking of the innovation of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and so on. But I would like to recall that the first one who has tried to make a launcher privately with private funds was a German, Lutz Kaiser, in the mid-70s, which was trying to develop a launcher which was called OTRAG. Did not succeed for many reasons, but at least it was the first one to have developed a launcher privately in the world. Europe was the first one to create the launch service operator Arianespace, so that was also an innovation. And I would like also to mention the program Paradigm, where the British Ministry of Defense has totally changed the approach for the development of a telecommunication satellite, Skynet 4, by just being a customer. So much before the ISS servicing, and Europe has created this approach of a market. Last not least, Europe is the most reliable partner in the world, because not easy to decide a program in Europe, because Europe is complex, but it's even more difficult to stop a program. And this is the reason why it makes of Europe the most reliable partner of the world. And the proof of that is that the next US telescope, James Webb, will be launched by Ariane 5 at the end of this year. We are always celebrating SpaceX, but never forget that NASA is putting his most expensive spacecraft on board Ariane 5 to be launched this year. And the same with the service module of the Orion capsule, which will go to the moon, which is a NASA program, and the service module is provided by the European. So that it's a demonstration of the trust vis-à-vis Europe. So this is to say that yes, Europe can be proud of what we have achieved there. There are only two deficits on which we may come back. Number one, this is the defense dimension. The defense dimension of the space, of the European space policy, is very small compared to the defense dimension of, for example, the US space policy. Never forget that NASA is not the most important space agency in the world. The most important space agency in the world is the Department of Defense of the United States, which is spending much more money than NASA in space. So the defense is certainly one of the deficits today in Europe. And the second deficit on which we may come back, not related to space, but Europe has missed the internet revolution, meaning that we have not the nouveau riche of internet like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Yuri Milner. But that is not a deficit in space. This is a deficit coming from internet, which has obviously consequence today on the development of space.
Thank you for all these elements. So I have a question on spatial big data. So last April, l'Élysée appointed Philippe Baptiste to succeed Jean-Yves Le Gall as director of CNES, so the French Space Agency. Among the various profiles that were proposed, his was chosen because as a doctor of computer science, he would better embody the new challenge of big data in space. So to what extent do you think that appointing a digital specialist rather than a space specialist can be interesting for CNES? And we can also mention the appointment of Joseph Aschbacher as the next Director General of ESA. So is there a general tendency to think that space big data is precisely where the future lies?
Okay, thank you. I shall not comment the appointment, but I am ready to answer your questions. Let's say that I am well placed to know that people change, but the organization continues. That it's I have left ESA, and ESA is continuing well. So the replacement of president and or director general is something which is happening in all organizations. But what I would like to say that each new DG or president is bringing not only his expertise, but also, and maybe even more important, his personality. I think that we should never forget the human dimension of a new boss. And I would not like to reduce Philippe Baptiste to a computer science expert. He's much more than that. As well as Joseph Aschbacher, saying that, yes, myself, I became director general when I was director of launcher at ESA. So you could imagine that I would have put launchers as the priority of ESA. Not at all. I was the one, with my colleagues obviously, but to develop the Earth observation programs, to make of the Earth observation programs by far the biggest budget of ESA, much before launchers. So we cannot just reduce the personality, new personality, whoever he is or she is, to his expertise. The human dimension is also very, very important. Having said that, it's clear that, and I was already mentioning that the connection between space and data is important. But this is not new. From the very start, we know that space is the only legal tool to collect data everywhere in the world and to transfer these data to everywhere else in the world. And this is the reason why space is so important for defense. Let's say satellites, they have replaced aircraft, they have replaced James Bond, they have replaced a lot of different ways to collect data because this is a legal tool. You can look, you can listen, you can do whatever you want from satellites, provided it's for peaceful purpose. But since the very beginning, there is a connection between space and data. Space has always been there to collect data and to transfer data. Now, obviously, the world has changed so dramatically to a data-driven world because we are driven by data. That it's just you, my grandchildren, everyone is looking at data to the point that, unfortunately, we are believing much more the data than our neighbor, and that is maybe a change that, as an old guy, I can regret. But this is a fact. We are living more and more with data, and this is the reason why the internet guys they have been interested in space. Not because they were dreaming of space, even if they are dreamers, let's say Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they are dreamers, and that it's good. But they are coming from the internet, and their business is based on data. And this is the reason why they are interested in space. And this is the reason why they are investing in space. So, and that has increased the importance of space for our current world. And by doing that, obviously, these newcomers, the Elon Musk, the Jeff Bezos, they are entering the space sector, and they are bringing their own standards, which are not the space standards, the cost standards, the time standards, but even more than that, their culture of risks, which was not anymore the standard of the space sector since the very beginning. Yes, at start, putting Yuri Gagarin in orbit was risky. Putting Armstrong on the moon was risky. But since then, I must say that we were taking less and less risks, and it was going along with the risk adversity of government. So we were not anymore a sector of risk in space. And the Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are bringing again this culture of risk, which is good for space, because you cannot cross the border of the unknown, because going to space is crossing the border of the unknown without taking risks. And this is the reason why I like the fact that the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezos, they are forcing the space sector to evolve and to evolve towards less cost. And when you are evolving to less cost, you are increasing the source of investment, because it was so high to invest in space that there was not a queue of investors. Now the costs have decreased, and there are more and more investors and more startups. It's what we call a new space. By the way, I would like just to quote Jeff Bezos, who said once in an interview that he has always been interested in space, and he wanted to invest in space. But to invest in space, he had first to become rich. And this is the reason why he has created Amazon. And that, okay, I am sure that this is not exactly the truth, but this is the way he presents that. So you had to be rich to invest in space. Now it's less and less the case, and this is the reason why there are more and more startups.
Thank you very much. And before continuing the debate and talking about new space, so we have a question coming from a professor at HEC, Mr. Etienne Krieger, who is also the co-director of the share Exploring the Future of Space Economy, created by ESA, HEC, and Ariane Group. And
on which items can the World International Space Agencies agree beyond their respective political agendas?
Let's say space agencies, they are there to do what governments ask them to do. Obviously, they are proposing to governments, but after decisions by governments, they have to just to implement what governments want them to do. But I think that maybe what the space agencies has brought since the very beginning is the international cooperation. The international cooperation did not come from directly from governments or from industry. International cooperation has been certainly the major aspect that space agencies could bring to space. And because today there is more and more international cooperation. I have worked myself on the space station, and the space station is certainly the symbol of international cooperation in space. And that it's interesting because the international cooperation goes beyond the relationship of governments. The Apollo-Soyuz, which was the first symbol of cooperation in space, the two Soviet cosmonauts and the three NASA astronauts shaking hands in orbit. The Apollo-Soyuz has been made in 1975 in the middle of the Cold War, meaning that we could have international cooperation in spite of the relationship on planet Earth. And the International Space Station is also the way to reconcile the west part and the east part when the Iron Wall fail on planet Earth, because the current International Space Station is a reunification of two space stations. The West Space Station, which was called Space Station Freedom, and the Eastern Space Station, which was Mir 2. So we have combined Freedom and Mir, which is interesting because at least the two words are interesting. Freedom and Mir were merged into the International Space Station. And since more than 20 years, we have astronauts living up there and working together. And as I was saying many times in my speeches when I was Director General of ESA, cooperation is difficult. It is always easier not to cooperate, because when you cooperate, you have to put together your interest, but not forgetting at the same time your own interest. So it's a combination of common interest and specific interest. So it's difficult, but it's very important because this is a laboratory of cooperation. Space is a laboratory of international cooperation. So that was certainly the most important achievement of space agencies. But now space agencies, they have to take another issue, which is a very important and urgent issue, which is the traffic management and the space debris. Because if you are a strong believer in the importance of space, and especially in the future of space, we cannot leave space polluted and by so many debris, and especially in the future there is a lot of debris. We cannot leave space. Okay, bon. And we have to by so many debris. There is a lot of debris. We cannot leave space. Okay, bon. And we have. Okay. So I'll continue. So just to say that the traffic management and the debris are a very important issue. I have myself inherited of a clean space. There was no man-made system in space when on the 4th of October 1957, and I would not like to transmit to the next generation a space which is polluted by so many debris. Even yesterday, there was a lot of news about this Chinese stage coming back to Earth, but I would not like to give the impression that only the Chinese launchers are coming back down to Earth. And I have understood that United States was complaining, but we can tell to United States that there was a piece of a SpaceX launcher discovered in France, in Brittany, and we also, the European, we have had a piece of the Vega launcher falling down in Brazil. So there is a lot of different pieces coming back from space to Earth. And there is also the pollution of debris in space, which will limit the use of space. So if we are a believer in the importance of space, we have to solve that. And this is certainly where the space agencies can have a role. Obviously, at the end, it will be government to take the decision, but the space agency, they have taken some actions, but this is urgent and dramatic. So this is my proposal for the space agencies, but I know that they are working on that.
Thank you. So now let's talk about new space. So the European Commission and the European Investment Fund have recently announced a 300 million investment for the space sector, and especially for startups. So the issue of private actors in the space sector is indeed becoming more and more important in the space debate since, for example, Thomas Pesquet flew to the ISS in the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule. So, in your opinion, is this a cornerstone of history in space?
But certainly, space is changing a lot, and it's good for space. And this is, let's say, good news for space because it shows the importance of space. Now, coming back to your initial point, the fact that the European Commission and the European Investment Fund are putting 300 million for European startups is certainly good news. Good news for them. At least for starting, but not enough for developing the startups. Because what I would like to insist on is the institutions, be it the European Commission, ESA, national agencies, should not treat the young enterprise apart. Because by putting 300 million dedicated to them, it's good for them, but it puts them also apart from the normal procurement system. And there is 300 million for startup, but there is more than 15 billion in Copernicus and Galileo. And what I would like is to have the young enterprise having access to this procurement. And that could be interesting even for the institutions to put in competition the big enterprise, long-standing space enterprise, but also in competition with the young enterprise. I know that it's not easy. I know that it may be even risky, but it can pay off. You were mentioning SpaceX. SpaceX has developed the day the NASA administrator Mike Griffin in 2006 has put in competition the ISS servicing between SpaceX, which was 4 years old. SpaceX has been created in 2002, meaning that in 2006, it was a very young enterprise. And NASA dared to put in competition SpaceX and Orbital Science at that time, vis-à-vis Lockheed and Boeing, who were the big enterprise, the long-standing big enterprise, and SpaceX won. And by winning that competition, which was a competition for big procurement, 5 launches per year, they won that competition, and they have delivered, demonstrating that there was risk, but it paid off for NASA, because that has reduced significantly the cost for NASA to service the ISS. And at that time, it was just for cargo. But after that, the successor of Griffin, Charlie Bolden, has opened another competition for crew transport to the ISS. But what I mean is that, yes, it's good to help the startups, and they need help because they take risks themselves, to help the startups at start. But the only way to make them develop in solid companies is to give them access to the procurement of institutions in competition with the other. And this is certainly the best way. Competition is important. Because competition is the best way for the institutions to get the customers to get the best price and the best product, but it's also a way for the competitors to improve themselves, because when they lose, they have no other choice but to improve. Meaning that competition is good not only for the customer, but also for the supplier. And this is where the competition is so important. So now, this is how new space and traditional space, which is the public part of space activities, can support each other. New space cannot exist without the public sector. Monsieur Musk has used technologies developed by DARPA and NASA. The Merlin engine is coming from NASA, DARPA and NASA. The tossback recovery of the first stage of Falcon 9 is coming from test financed in the early 90s within the Delta X and Delta Clipper project. So, SpaceX has benefited from the technologies developed by the public sector and is benefiting, as I said, from the public market coming from the public sector. So there is no opposition between new space and traditional space. New space needs the public sector to have technologies and access to a public market, as well as the public sector needs the new space to decrease their cost. So this is mutual benefit between new space and traditional space, I would say. Because new space today, in terms of investments, represent less than 10% of the investment in space. The majority of the investment is still public investments. And this is where new space is not so much a question of investment, but it's a question of standards, as I said, cost standards, risk takings, and so on. That this is certainly the most important part, which is brought by new space. But let's face it, private investments are taking place where the public investment are the highest. So there is no surprise that the private investment they have started where the public investments are the highest, which is the United States. But in return, interesting to see that the public investments have increased thanks to the private investment. There is no replacement. On the contrary, there is a leverage, because since SpaceX is there, the budget of NASA has increased every year by the budget of CNES. Every year, NASA gets the equivalent of the budget of the French space agencies every year, which is a demonstration that the public investment are increasing also where there is private investment, because there is a leverage, there is more efficiency. So I am confident that that will continue with this synergy between new space and traditional space. It's only one space where we have the public investments, which are still the biggest one, and the private investments. But again, it's not only a question of investment, it's also a question of standards.
Okay, thank you. So we understand that the public and the private sector have to work together, but can we fear for the European sovereignty that the new space and the private companies are also in the spatial game? So after the spatial acts in the US, so they can extract the spatial resources. And yes, is it a problem for the public sphere?
I don't think that this is a problem. It's a solution. Let's say using space resources is, let's say, you cannot, space resources. I have been instrumental in working with Luxembourg for Luxembourg to take the initiative of space resources in 2016, and at that time it was taken as totally crazy. But today, NASA has produced oxygen on Mars, which is the first. space resources ever made on Mars. And I am sure that the lunar base, there will be no lunar base without the use of lunar resources. That it's for sure. So space resources are a solution for making space missions sustainable. That I am convinced of that. But again, I think that that does not change what you said, the European sovereignty. The European sovereignty is a question for Europeans, not a question for Americans or for Chinese or for whatever. It's to Europe to decide to sustain their sovereignty. And this is what they are doing, by the way. There is a lot of initiative taken now in Europe to make sure that this revolution of new space in the US and in China, because I can tell you that in China, the new space is very, very present also, is not putting at risk the sovereignty of Europe. And I am not so scared because there is more and more startups in Europe, more and more investment in Europe, more and more new solutions in Europe. And this is the reason why, as usual, Europe has started later because of the size of the public market, which is much smaller than the ones in the United States and in China, because of we missed the internet revolution, and so on and so on. So there are good reasons for Europe to be late. But in my view, as usual, Europe will not only catch up, but will be again on the forefront of the new space in just a couple of years. Why? Because there is a lot of expertise in Europe. Let's say the diversity of Europe is certainly a complexity, but it's also a richness. I have worked myself in ESA with 23 nationalities. I can tell you that the diversity is fantastic. Innovation is coming from diversity. So we have a lot of different expertise in Europe. And by the way, less expensive than in California. And there is more and more startups from California moving to Europe because they find experts at a much lower cost. So that a lot of expertise. We have something which does not exist anywhere else in the world. It's our culture of cooperation. Cooperation is our daily culture. We are cooperating every day in Europe. And that does not exist. When I was DG of ESA, I was telling that to the NASA administrator or to the Russian Director General. I was saying, if there is one topic on which I can teach you, it's cooperation. Because I know what it is. Every day I am cooperating. So culture of cooperation. And number three, if we miss the internet revolution, we have in Europe a lot of industrial sectors which can be very useful to be connected with the space sector. The automotive industry. We have huge automotive industrial companies which will need the space more and more for connectivity, for navigation, and the autonomous cars. They need the information coming from space. So automotive, resource industry. You were speaking of space resources. I was always saying that space resources is not a matter for space industry, but for resource industry. By the way, it's good that Monsieur Baptiste was also in Total in his career. So resource industry, aeronautics industry. We have a lot of industrial sectors in Europe, provided we are able to build the bridges with these sectors. I always said myself, I have a car that I am just keeping as a toy. My car is, I have bought it in 1979, which is true, it can be checked. And this is a Volkswagen Beetle, which I like very much. An old Beetle, not a new Beetle. But I bought it in 1979. And 1979 was the first launch of Ariane 1. I can tell you that there is much more difference between my car of 1979 and a car of today than between Ariane 1 and Ariane 6. Meaning that the automotive industry has moved much quicker than the launch. Obviously, this is not the same mass production rate that today we shall produce launchers at the rate of automobiles. It's not yet there. But just to say that we have, in the space sector, we have to integrate technologies which are not space, but which are very important for space. And we have to learn a lot from automotive industry. Today, a car does not need anymore a garagist because this is a car which tells you where she has a problem. If we were bringing that into the launcher industry, that will be a significant change. But again, this is not to criticize anyone, but this is just to say that we have in Europe a lot of assets to make, to not only to catch up our retard, but to be at the forefront of the activities in new space. So I am confident on that, provided, and I shall finish by that the Europeans are able to take risks. Because to win, you have to take risks. And unfortunately, if there is some difference between Europeans and Americans on one side or Chinese on the other side, this is to be afraid of taking risks. And unfortunately, as I told you, I am still a professor. I am always telling to my students, the more you are educated, the less risk you are ready to take, which is totally crazy. Because I wish that the more educated you are, the more risk you are ready to take. So it is changing because there is more and more startups being created by students, which was not the case in my time. So I am confident, and you will see Europe will catch up more than that.
Thank you. So we only have a few minutes left for questions from the audience. So the first one is, how would you explain the benefits of space exploration to European citizens that consider it as a waste of money?
Yes, it's the day we shall switch off all satellites, they will understand that they cannot live anymore without satellites. I can tell you that the taxi driver that I have taken this morning, he has used the GPS, and without GPS, I would not be here today. So just to say that space is certainly an expense, but this is also a fantastic benefit for weather forecast. And weather forecast is 30% of the European economy, because weather forecast is agriculture, it's tourism, it's transport, it's everything. So there is a lot of benefit from space. And also, space is more just than the economy and the benefits. I dare to say that space has changed the vision of planet Earth. I was speaking of Apollo 8. The most important heritage of the Apollo program is not Armstrong stepping on the moon, because this world is over. What is not over is the fact that planet Earth is fragile, unique, and finite. And that is the heritage of Apollo. When Bill Anders, Christmas 1968, came back from the far side of the moon and see the planet Earth rising in the sky, he said that we have made all these trip to explore the moon, but the most important is that we have discovered planet Earth. And this was the starting point of what was ecology, what was the consumption of resources. The Meadows report is 1972. And the Meadows report is the limits of growth in a finite world. At that time, it was totally disregarded because growth was still the mantra of all the economy. But they have said that living on a finite planet has consequence. And we have to take care of that. And number two, space is a fantastic laboratory of sustainable development. Not because we like sustainable development, but because it's a necessity in space. We have no choice but to limit the use of resources, to recycle the resources, to take care of the spacecraft. I was saying that we are 7 billion of astronauts on planet Earth. If we were doing like the ISS astronauts, spending 50% of our time just to take care of our spacecraft, that would be a total change. And space resources. We cannot live in space without using the in situ resources. And that will, in the long term, break the finite character of planet Earth. The day we have access to space resources, it's at least one of the finite character which we can break. Don't forget that since I was at school I was taught by my professors that we were 2.5 billion of inhabitants on planet Earth. Within one life, the population has been multiplied by a factor of more than 3. But during the same time, the consumption of natural resources has been multiplied by a factor of 20. That we cannot continue like that. And this is, again, space is a laboratory for that. So, yes, we are spending money in space, but frankly speaking, I think that the return is much more important than the expense.
Another question is, why is the astronaut selection process limited to applicants with natural science degrees? Isn't it interdisciplinary approach valuable to a good mission team?
You are right. Again, I have I shall not comment on the. I have made one selection myself when I was DG Visa. It was in 2008. Not easy to make a selection of astronauts because you have so many candidates. As I said, in 2008, and this is true, I have opened at that time 4 positions of astronauts at ESA and 5 positions of directors. True, can be checked. For 4 positions of astronauts, we got 8,000 candidates. For 5 positions of directors, we got 80 candidates. So my conclusion was it was 100 more interesting to be an astronaut than to be a director. That it's, but just to say that the selection of astronaut, yes, certainly the expertise is important. Yes, certainly the physical aspects, the psychology, and so on. But at the end, the most important aspect is the human dimension of the astronauts, because they have to work as a team, and the human dimension is very, very important. You can always learn physics or natural science or whatever. Much more difficult to learn to be a human. And the human aspect of an astronaut is so important, not only to work in space, but also as an ambassador of space on ground. I said when I was DG Visa that an astronaut is much more important on ground than in orbit. Obviously, he is useful or she is useful in orbit, but much more important on ground, being an ambassador of space, and especially to the young generations. And I can tell you that each time I was on stage with an astronaut, nobody cared about the director general. Everyone was caring about the astronaut, which is much more important than to be a director general.
Thank you. So Maybe we can just finish on a question which is a little bit different. Sorry. When can I fly to Mars?
I don't know when, but the when is not important. They say Mars is still there for 5 billion of years, as well as planet Earth. And as I say many times, I am much more concerned about the sustainability of humanity than by the sustainability of planet Earth. So I think that we shall go to Mars. I have no doubt on that. But this is not the most urgent objective. There is so many other objectives. But myself, I am a strong believer in tourism. Maybe the first flight to Mars will be with tourists. And I can tell you that myself, the day the tickets are consistent with my bank, I shall go as a tourist. I have no, and I am sure that tourism will change space activities exactly as tourism has changed the aeronautics. But before going to Mars, we have to know how to use the in situ resources, because you will have to stay on Mars. And you cannot bring each liter of water that you need, each liter of oxygen, each potato and that you need to stay there. So using the resources in situ are very important. And this is the reason why that will start with the moon as a laboratory of that, because the lunar base, again, cannot be sustainable without using the in situ resources. So that it's a preliminary. Now, if it's not in the next 30 years, again, it may change for the individuals, but it will not change for the humanity.
Okay, so it's 12:30. Unfortunately, we will have to stop here. Thank you very, very much for these very interesting elements. It was a pleasure to discuss with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.